Some of you will be reading articles about diagnosis instead of about interventions. These articles are testing whether a specific tool, a screening tool or an assessment tool, are reliable or valid, in that they appropriately discriminate between individuals who have a specific condition and those who do not. Typically, diagnostic research will involve taking a group of participants and administering at least 2 tests. One test will be the index test. The index test is the one they're trying to study. The other test will be a reference test. The reference test is usually the gold standard diagnostic test for that condition. Researchers might even choose multiple tests to use as their reference test. In the end, they compare the results between the 2 tests. Ideally, participants who score low on the reference test should score low on the index test as well, and vice versa. One example would be an autism diagnostic tool. Let's say there's a researcher who thinks they can identify autism using a brain scan, which, by the way, has not been discovered. They take a group of participants, probably some that they think do have the disorder and others that don't, or they take a very large group of people and assume that at least some would happen to have autism. All the participants will get the brain scan, and all will get the gold standard autism diagnostic tool that's generally considered to be the ADOS, the Autism Diagnostic Observation Schedule. They'll take them in random order. Then they'll compare their results to see if the people who looked like they had autism according to the ADOS also looked like they had autism according to the brain scan. Well, a problem arises when the people who are carrying out or interpreting the tests know too much about the child. What if I administer the ADOS and then immediately bring the child in for a brain scan and interpret the scan? If I thought the ADOS indicated that the child had autism, how do you think I'd interpret the brain scan? I'd probably be more likely to interpret it as identifying autism. I'd see patterns in the data that I thought were indicative of autism, even if those patterns weren't really there. And then my findings don't accurately show how reliable and valid the brain scan is. The same would happen if it went the other way around. If I saw the child's brain scan and I didn't think it was indicative of autism, then I administered the ADOS. I'd be more likely to score the items on the ADOS that would indicate the child did not have autism. I'd be more likely to not notice red flags or concerning behaviors because I'd already be primed to think that the child didn't have autism. And then again, my findings about how reliable and valid the brain scan is aren't accurate. In most cases, the person who administers one test probably won't be the same person that administers the other test. But even if they are different people, they have to be blind to the participant's performance on either test, or even blind to the participant's diagnosis if they came in with one. Like when the researchers didn't do the diagnosing, they just reviewed medical records to determine a diagnosis, which can also happen. But if the person administering a test knows anything about the participant, that could skew their scoring and interpretation of the test, and even the way they give it. So when you're reading a diagnostic article, you have to look for blinding. No one involved in testing or interpretation should know the participant's prior performance or prior diagnoses. Tests should not be administered by the same examiner. The examiners shouldn't have any information about the participants that could systematically influence the way they administer, score, or interpret results. Where possible, you can blind statisticians and other study personnel to the true diagnosis of the participant. And blinding reduces the amount of bias that's possible and probable. It increases the diagnostic accuracy of your results, and it increases the internal validity of your study. Then, when it comes to deciding how well the new measurement tool works, you'll consider things like sensitivity and specificity, which will be covered in the next mini lesson.